So today I'm talking about a Honda with the P0172 code, what it is and how you go about fixing it. And so what is a Honda P0172 code? Well, it's a fuel system too rich bank 1. And what does this mean? Well, the onboard computer is seeing too much gas going into the engine and not enough oxygen, and so it's throwing out this error code, and it'll have to be troubleshooted to know why. One thing to note is that the bank 1, sensor 1 oxygen sensor is reporting back to the onboard computer that the engine's running rich on bank 1, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that sensor's bad. A lot of people will go out and replace that sensor, and while it might be bad, it can be caused by something else, and that bank 1, sensor 1 is just reporting it back to the onboard computer. So that's something to keep in mind. And this code can be problematic sometimes since it can be caused by so many different things, but I'm going to go over how you can narrow it down and find out what the cause is. And so what are some possible causes? Well, it could be a dirty air filter, could be the mass airflow sensor, could be a clogged fuel filter, could be the fuel pump, could be a vacuum leak, could be a bad oxygen sensor, and possibly a bad injector. And so bank 1 side of the engine is always going to be the side with the number 1 cylinder. So if you find the number 1 cylinder, then that side of the engine is going to be bank 1, and then the opposite is going to be bank 2. If you just have a 4-cylinder engine, then it wouldn't matter. You only have one bank. But if you have a V6 engine, then find the number 1 cylinder, that'll be bank 1, opposite will be bank 2. And bank 1 is the side of the engine the onboard computer is seeing a problem with. And so the first thing to go and check is going to be the air filter. Be sure that's not all clogged up real bad and dirty or anything like this, because if the air filter is really dirty and clogged up, then it could block the airflow going into the engine, and this can throw things off. So first thing to do is go check that air filter and be sure that it looks good. And then the next thing to go and check is going to be the mass airflow sensor, called the MAF sensor. And this will be located up near the air intake box somewhere. And basically what this does is it just reads all the air that goes into the engine and then just reports back to the onboard computer how much air has gone into the engine. And then the onboard computer uses this to know how much oxygen is going into the cylinders. And so the next thing to go and do is to check out that MAF sensor. There's some different ways you go about testing that MAF sensor. One way you could do it is that if you have an OBD2 scan tool, you could go into the live data section and find the MAF sensor grams per second. And then with the key on, but the engine not running, just check to see if you're reading anything, because without the engine running, you shouldn't be reading anything high or anything abnormal. If you are reading something high, then it's a sign that it's failed. You can also start the engine. You can see with the grams per second R, you can double the RPMs, and the grams per second should also double. And so there's some different ways you go about testing the MAF sensor, but the next thing to go and do is to go and test that MAF sensor and be sure it's working right. And so if the MAF sensor tests good, then the next thing to go and check is going to be the fuel delivery. And this could be like the fuel pump or the fuel filter or things like this. Sometimes there's an inline fuel filter. Sometimes the fuel filter is on the fuel pump. If you do happen to have an inline fuel filter, then it'd be a good idea to go and swap that out just to rule it out as a possible cause. A really quick way that you could rule out a fuel delivery problem is to get a fuel pressure gauge and you hook it up on the fuel rail, and then you see what the rated PSI is for your Honda, and you check to see that if it's right. And if it is correct, then you know it's not a fuel delivery issue and you can move on to something else. For example, say your Honda is rated for 50 PSI for fuel pressure, and you hook up a fuel pressure gauge on the fuel rail, and it comes in less than that. It comes in at like 30 or 40 or something like that. Then you'll know there's a problem inside the fuel delivery system, and you could go troubleshoot it. Could be a bad fuel pump, could be a fuel filter, something along these lines. And so if possible, it's always a good idea to do a fuel pressure test. If you don't have a fuel pressure gauge, you can get these as like loaners at like automotive stores. But the next thing to do, if possible, is to do a fuel pressure test. If you can't do a fuel pressure test, then just keep in mind it could be a fuel pump, or it could be a clogged up fuel filter or something like that. But the next thing to go and check is going to be fuel delivery. And then the next thing that can cause this problem is going to be that there's a vacuum leak somewhere going on around the intake, and it's just throwing everything off. And there's different ways you go about trying to find a vacuum leak. Some mechanics will carry around a fluid. They'll start the engine and then they'll spray wherever they think that a vacuum leak is. And if the engine idle changes, then you know they found it. Another method is that you use a smoke machine and you feed smoke into the air intake, and wherever the smoke comes out, then you'd know where the leak's at and you'd be able to fix it. So there's some different methods about going around trying to find a vacuum leak. But the next thing to go and do is to check out all these hoses and everything going into the intake manifold and be sure there's no vacuum leaks going on. And so if you go through all of that and you check all those things and there's no issues going on, then it is possible that that bank 1, sensor 1 upstream oxygen sensor has failed and just needs to be replaced. Again, you can test this if you want to. There's some good YouTube videos on how you go about testing these. Basically, you're going to have bank 1, sensor 1, upstream oxygen sensor located before the catalytic converter, and then you're going to have bank 1, sensor 2, downstream oxygen sensor located after the catalytic converter. So the one you want to go check out is going to be the bank 1, sensor 1, upstream oxygen sensor. And so if you've gone through all of those things and there's no issues going on with any of those things, all those things test good, then the last thing to go and check is going to be for a bad injector on that bank 1. is that one or more of those injectors on bank 1 is causing a problem and just needs to be replaced. Again, you can test them if you want to, but the next thing to go and check is going to be for a bad injector on bank 1. And so that's basically it. I just wanted to make a video on how you go about fixing a Honda with the P0172 code. If you have anything to add, please comment down below. If you have any questions, ask me and I'll try to answer them. If this video helps you, please click like, please click subscribe, and have a good day.